What scares communist regimes more than a protest? A prayer meeting. Because you can arrest activists, you can censor journalists, you can shut down rallies, but what do you do when Christians start gathering around the country asking God to break the spirit of fear? That's what's reportedly happening in Cuba right now. According to organizers and reporting from Breitbart, Christians across Cuba gathered in nearby 24 locations on April 26 to pray for freedom from communist dictatorship. And this wasn't just some quiet church service where everyone kept their heads down and avoided politics. They were praying for Cuba to be delivered. They were asking for God to restore the nation. And here's the part the regime understands better than most people. When faith becomes public, fear starts losing its grip, because Cuba's communist government has spent decades trying to control religion. They don't always ban it outright. That would make it too obvious. Instead, they control it. They pressure churches, monitor religious leaders, they restrict unregistered groups, they make sure faith stays quiet, private, and harmless. But here's the problem. Christianity is not harmless to tyranny, because Christianity says the state is not God, the dictator is not God, the party is not God, and no government owns the soul of the nation. At the same time Christians were gathering in Cuba, Cuban exiles and supporters were gathering in Miami at the United for a Free Cuba event, praying and calling for action. But the real story is not just in Miami. The real story is what happened inside of Cuba, because when people living under the regime are starting to pray publicly for freedom, that is not just religious expression. That is spiritual defiance. And no, this doesn't mean the regime falls tomorrow, but it does mean something important is happening. The fear is cracking. The faith is coming out in the open, and after decades of communism trying to bury Christianity in Cuba, Christians are standing up and saying, Cuba does not belong to the regime. Cuba belongs to God. And that may be exactly what the regime is afraid of.